Okay, well, I think it looks like we're at a good point to start. Thanks everyone for joining our webinar on how physical AI is transforming manufacturing. My name is Aristo Chang, and I'm on the product marketing team at Archetype AI. We have a great discussion in store for you today with our featured speakers, Raleigh Murch from NTT DATA and Sisinio Baldis from Archetype. But before we hop into that session, let's just cover a few housekeeping slides. So first off, we will be recording this webinar, so we'll share a copy of the session after. And second, as you have questions throughout, please feel free to submit them. There is a Q&A feature on Zoom that you can add questions to. We'll be covering them all at the end. But keep in mind, there's a Q&A and there's a chat. We won't be monitoring the chat, but we will be monitoring the Q&A. So please submit questions to that. Okay, so quickly, for today's discussion, here's a quick agenda. We're first going to start off with hearing from Raleigh and Sisinio on some of the key trends that we're seeing in physical AI, the opportunities and use cases in manufacturing, as well as some practical learnings from actually deploying in the real world. We'll then move to hear a little bit more about the Archetype AI platform. We hear more about what we do and the use cases we solve for. And then we'll end with a live Q&A with the team. Okay, and so for today's speakers, we're excited to welcome Raleigh Murch, who heads up physical AI at NTT Data, and Sisinio Baldis, who runs solution engineering at Archetype. And you've already met me. I will be moderating the webinar. Okay, so now we'll hop into the discussion. And I will stop sharing. And we can, let's see, we can hear from uh, both Raleigh and Sisinio. And how about we actually start off with introductions from both of you and hear more about you and what your teams do in the physical AI space. So how about we start first with Raleigh and then we'll move to Sisinio.
Yeah, thanks, Aristo. I'm glad to be with you all today. Appreciate the opportunity here to talk about certainly one of my favorite topics. So, as you mentioned and kicked off with, my name is Raleigh Murch. I'm the managing director for Physical AI here at NTT Data. And if you're not familiar with NTT Data, think about us as we're a sort of a $30 billion company, IT services company inside of a $100 billion, sort of a full stack, technology firm at large. And so we do everything, when we say full stack, we do everything from undersea cables all the way to satellites and sort of everything in between. So when we talk about physical AI and being in the physical world, we're very much sort of in the physical world as practitioners. And so I guess if you think about sort of where I live, I'm sort of at that intersection of AI strategy and the physical world. So you think about I often call myself a solutions Rolodex, thinking about what we offer among many of our practices between our innovation groups, our R&D area. And we're spending over 3.6, I think it's even upwards of that, billion dollars in R&D every year. So a lot of it's being a bit of an orchestrator, being a bit of a solutions Rolodex to understand what's available at sort of time of need, but actually in the real world. So I spend a lot of time playing dress up, doing Gemba walks, going and do site assessments on site. In fact, I think it was just a couple of days ago, I was in a set of scrubs in a surgical room as part of a medical center. We were looking at applying some of the manufacturing technologies and design patterns in the medical field. So it's really very much about being outside and understanding how do we apply AI out of the browser and ultimately in the real world. So a lot of sort of anecdotes and stories to talk about today.
That's great. Sisinio?
Yeah, hi everyone. Sisinio Baldis. I head off our solutions engineering for Archetype. I've got a wonderful opportunity to work in solutions. It's my favorite job in a company sitting at kind of the median between customers and our internal product and engineering teams, and really trying to figure out how to adopt our technology our archetype platform, our Newton model, to solve real world problems. It's exciting to work through from the top of funnel all the way to implementations and delivery to truly understand the needs and to come up with it. It's a challenging job because this world of physical AI, this new capability that we have, um, it provides a new level of capability that wasn't there before, and really, transitioning companies into this physical AI world. It's a lot of it's challenging work, but it's exciting because we can see the opportunities it gives organizations to really understand and gain intelligence about their assets, their workplace, their organizations at a level that they haven't been able to before. So I'm truly excited about being able to do this here and to have this conversation today. Thanks, Aristo.
Yeah. Thanks, both. It was great hearing about both your backgrounds, and I think we have the right people for this webinar. So thank you. This first question, let's actually hand it over to Sisinio, and I think this will be great for framing the conversation. But physical AI means different things to different people. And so, Sisinio, what is physical AI, and how is that different from, let's say, more traditional analytics or machine learning that maybe we're more used to?
Yeah, great question. And we spend a lot of time having these discussions with customers. I think what physical AI is to us at Archetype is the ability to gain intelligence about the real world. We're seeing a lot of this under the areas of self-driving cars and robotics, but for us, physical AI is a much broader umbrella that covers those areas, but also just sensing in general. I think anytime where you have sensors and the ability to sense into the real physical world, real sensors like accelerometers, current sensors, video, radar. These are physical sensors in the world, and how do we how do we make sense of them? As a human, we use our senses to understand the world. Physical AI lets us now have an understanding of the world with the sensor fleet that exists already, and it's been a progression as you look at traditional analytics or ML. I mean, we started sensing the world back, with things like the thermometer and thermocouples and thermistors, and that led to exciting things like thermostats, right? So now you can control an entire building using these sensing technologies. And as we develop more and more types of sensors over time, we also start to develop a lot more data. Our techniques for making decisions on these sensors started with simple mathematical and analytical thresholds, slopes, calculus, FFTs. And as we gained more and more and more capability, more data, as we moved into that kind of that big data world, ML really took off, and we were able to build these really highly optimized use cases on a small number of sensors to solve a very specific problem, and that was very transformational. But the same way that Chat GPT, and Chat GPT were able to take the next, step from just very simple semantic understandings of a few words. They took a different approach. They consumed the world of text, the world of books, the world of newspapers, social media, and now using a foundation model could apply that foundation model to not only do semantic understanding, but to do generative text and have these entire chatbots that are very sophisticated. Archetype, what we've done is a similar approach where we've collected a world of physical sensor data. And now we have a capability to understand and generalize across use cases, across sensors, effectively understanding physics without actually putting physics equations in the model. What the Newton model has done is it has sensed the world and now statistically understands physics. And we can bridge these different modalities together.
Great. Thanks, Sisinio. It's great to hear about that progression over time. Let's switch this over to Raleigh. Raleigh, we know you spend a lot of time with industrial manufacturing leaders. What shifts are you seeing and how they are approaching AI in their physical operations, especially as we head into 2026?
Yeah, I think, when you think about 2026, it's really, sort of the honeymoon phase for just let's implement AI, let's find places to put AI is sort of over. And I think now sort of moved from, you know, can we do AI? Where do we do AI to where is, sort of AI paying back? Right. So they're really looking for validation on use cases, not just to go back to the board to say, hey, we're sort of practicing AI. And so one of the strategies that we're thinking about is, let's start at the top and just let's stop selling AI, and let's start with a business objective, sort of work backwards, from there, which is not new. But what is new is I think there are new ingredients. I mean, Sisinio talked about a lot of new advancements. So there, as if you go back to the Rolodex example, there are sort of new cards in the Rolodex today, and those new cards or those new ingredients, they foster new recipes in terms of what's available. So what's possible today in terms of the state of the art was just wasn't possible at all. It fundamentally changes what's solvable. So if you think about, a couple of things that I'm excited about is some of the advancements in situational awareness, with the vision language action models. And as someone that has practiced lived in the field with doing computer vision elements of old, it was brittle and sort of all its own story, and it was really tough to scale in those scenarios. But you think about situational awareness that we have available now. If you think about, I mean, shoot, even Newton speaking, native OT, if I can call it that, from that perspective. So now we have a mastery and understanding of images. We have a mastery and understanding of sensor data. And so think about applying that to then business objectives to then generate opportunities. And I think that's how we engage leaders to solve sort of business problems, engaging in AI in ways that are meaningful and not just putting a chatbot on the floor and calling it a sort of a win, I guess.
Yeah, that's great to hear that. I think that actually is a good segue to the next question. The next question is, where are you actually seeing enterprises gain value today? And are there, outside of, the chatbots on the floor, are there use cases that you're seeing that are more likely to get that budget approval?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of recent traction in, I guess, safety compliance, work method validation, and sort of SOP creation. We're finding, and oftentimes when we're doing work method validation, there's deviation from work method from the actual work methods. Sometimes that's a problem. Sometimes it's optimization in the field that's been attained by many, many years of experience. And so there's a modernization issue with some of the work methods. And so then how can we then facilitate, now that we've detected the drift, how do we facilitate SOP modernization? So we're doing some work there, and there's a ton of interest, and it kind of goes back to the answer to the last question around vision analytics. Like that's a whole other opportunity to sort of revisit when we think about the capabilities in sort of vision. My background, I spent a lot of time on factory floors, trying to drive and trying to scale computer vision opportunities. And I think we had a tough time, right? You think about all the images that required training and the brittle model pipelines and the models constantly drifting and the situations changing within a manufacturing environment. And so there's, sort of a lot of opportunity in reopening failed computer vision projects, going back to sort of customers who have tried that and applying some of these new capabilities that's just really, really creating new possibilities, new propensity to scale, that sort of thing. But I think the real, sort of, I guess budget hack for us as we think about likely to get budget approval is really around, tying it to existing line items, right? And this has been a learning for me over my career is that I'm an advocate. I get really excited about pitching innovation. I want to sell customers on the innovation, the art of the possible. And come to find out as you spend time doing that, you spend time selling from passion, you're at the end of the day, you're waiting in line, right? If you pitch an innovation, it's so is everyone else, right? So you really need to find a P&L line item you can gravitate towards and think about, how can I, cut rework through 15% and use the application of technology, which is sort of the afterthought, to attain that goal. And that's really what gets you I guess a PO.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also love just the point you brought up about taking a look at some of those use cases that couldn't have been solved before, and with that Rolodex, you now have new technologies, new solutions to apply to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Sistinio, you help our customers deploy physical AI into the real world. Would love to hear what characteristics you're finding make a use case well suited for physical AI, and also, what value you're seeing unlocked from that.
Yeah, great question. So I think there's a lot of things. I mean, I think Raleigh did a good job of starting to talk about that. I think really use cases that are closely aligned to ROI really make a lot of sense. And where we really need to do is have buy-in at the business level, right? So we work with a lot of clients and with the innovations teams and a lot of really smart people. We also need a business leader that needs to take that C and ROI associated with that to deliver that. I think that's kind of critical for an adoption of physical AI. Um, and then and more tactically, I think things like data, access to good data, access to good labeled data. We don't necessarily need the data for training, but we definitely need it for evaluation, right? So how do we, validate in an operating situation that the model is performing as it should? We have a lot of levers and dials that we can apply to Newton, for example, to everything from just using the base foundation model and doing kind of parameter tuning. We can provide n-shot examples, and for those are examples specific to, suppose, a drill site or a certain asset being used. And then we can do more sophisticated things like fine tune a model. We can create models that are very optimized for a domain, suppose. If your organization has very specific domain knowledge, we can take our foundation model and give you performance increases that are more specific to you. And then we can do things like minimize and optimize. I think those are all things that you have to take into account when you're looking at the use case. I think the other thing that's also important is when you think about the use case, think about adoption. Physical AI is not just in the cloud, right? Physical AI deploys anywhere and it deploys where it's best optimally used. So you can think of a spectrum of AI where it goes all the way from the cloud all the way down to the right sitting next to or on the physical sensor itself and everything in between, on-prem, sitting on the factory floor at an edge, telco edge, all the way up to a cloud deployment. These are all things that you need to consider when you go on your physical AI journey because it matters as to who you decide to take that path with. Um, yeah, so I think there's a lot of things to consider when going through this. But yeah, I'd say from an organizational perspective, just having the right buy-in, the right people involved, and really addressing, to Raleigh's point, ROI and how are we deriving benefit out of this? A very strong opinion on that and a very strong use case is really important. And then the other side is just how you're deploying this. And the last thing I think too that's really important from use case as well, it depends on the level of requirements from a data sovereignty perspective. A lot of our clients actually need, their data is precious to them. So understanding what solutions are out there where you can kind of retain that data as yours, or where it's okay to put it up in a hosted cloud situation.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Thank you, Sistinio. Okay, next one. This one's for you, Raleigh. I think we've all seen this over the last couple of years, lots of experimentation in AI. So would love to hear, how enterprises can move from those one-off pilots to, broader, longer term strategies or portfolios of initiatives that they can work on.
Yeah, I was afraid that question was going to come in one form or another here when we're talking about emerging technology. And so, I guess to be upfront, one of the, I've spent the majority of my career in emerging technology, from sort of early pay station automation was my first job out of college, and had a sort of a startup in the marine industry where I was building analytics for boat engines, all the way through doing work with AWS on computer vision technology. So I've sort of seen lots of experiments. And I think when you're gonna, if you're gonna sort of get to the moon, you're gonna lose some rockets in the ocean. So fundamentally, I want to stand here and tell you that there's a golden key that unlocks, kind of a mountain of failed POCs. But what you can do is sort of manage risk acceptance, right? And the way that I've learned to manage risk acceptance over the years is you want to sort of, you know, compartmentalize your experiment, the experiments that you want to do, and leverage, kind of repeatable foundations. And so if we can shorten distance from sort of, experiment to production. I think that's what drives better, maybe efficacy. One of the things, you think about practically how do we do that? So I'm not just sort of talking high level concepts. We build a lot of sort of offerings and foundational frameworks so that we get to stand on the backs of those proven frameworks. We have partnerships with the likes of Archetype and hyperscalers, wherein you think about there's a common denominator of functionality that's available when you think about pipelining, and you think about model management and those sorts of things. And so then we focus the experiments on just what are the questions in the outcome? What are the things that we don't think that we have answers to? And I mentioned earlier, we as NTT Data, we spend a lot of money on sort of research. What we try to do is focus on beating some of these experiments. And so if you think about, you've got great hyperscaler relationships, you've got great partners that wake up every day and think about how to put together a best in class physical AI. Then you start to define where the pockets of risk are, and then NTT Data tries to focus on addressing those risk areas, so that we're effectively just when we get to customer problems, we're focusing on that last mile. So what's unique is the customer specific problem. We know we have a great foundation. We know we have good application of technology where it makes sense. So let's just focus on the high risk area, so that if we can solve that problem, if we can focus together and solve that specific problem, everything else is just common sort of highway. If you do that versus fight the urge to do a bespoke solution every single time, then I think you're gonna minimize your sort of rocket fall into the ocean, as it were, right? Like, use the tested engine, use the tested architecture and specs, and just focus on the areas that you think are really critical to insight. And when you get past that, put it all together, and that gives you more of a propensity for scale, because you're building on standing on the shoulders of scalable elements, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Love that idea of understanding those pockets of risk, but also love the analogy of getting to the moon. So thanks for that.
One other thing that comes to mind, Arista, if I may, is, and this is maybe an unsexy answer, but when we're probably a room full of technologists here, is, a lot of it also comes down to, adoption and AI literacy, right? So sometimes the biggest problem isn't just the technology and solving the technology problem. It's really around how the organization adopts the technology, how you adjust for the technology. I can't tell you how many times we've been, on a factory floor doing some work method validation project, and we've got cameras down there, and the cameras get disheveled, or cords get cut, or things ultimately get sabotaged. Why do they get sabotaged? Because there's not a great understanding about the objective of what we're trying to do, right? We're not trying to apply AI to be a big brother. It's really trying to, do a lot of the, automate a lot of the dirty tasks that people don't want to do. And in those cases, if you start to educate, if you start to build literacy in, then there's a higher propensity for adoption beyond the kind of the technology challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. Sisinio, let's actually move to you. Would love to hear more about the top pitfalls that you see actually stall some of these initiatives when we actually move into these deployments.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I think there was a MIT study that came out last year about LLMs and in the in being deployed right in industrial settings and for businesses, and they're finding that the majority of those implementations are failing, right? So, and the conclusion was is that it's not that the models, no, it's not that the AI was failing, is that the implementation is failing, right? And kind of to some of to Raleigh's points, I think um, what organizations need to really understand that transitioning to physical AI is a mindset shift. It really has to come, the company, the organization really has to buy in. I think top to bottom. Kind of one of the things that resonated with Raleigh, what he said is like the suspicion of people on the factory floor. I think everyone from the CEO down to line workers doing assembly need to understand the value of what this brings, and it does help if you're looking at quality as being a measure for your company. I mean, that has to be understood top to bottom. It's not oversight over the end person. It's understanding how we can optimize our process, how we can build better SOPs, how we can follow these SOP better, how we can, put in factory equipment and have our assets monitored on a cycle where we've got clients that we're working with when their equipment fails, it triggers SLAs. Those SLAs cost money. So I think from an organizational perspective, I think we need to really understand and know that we're going in this on the long journey. It's like the adoption of when companies transitioned over to the internet or from paper to IT systems. It's a journey that is ongoing, right? It takes a long time, and I think one of the pitfalls often is a misalignment on how quickly you can get there. I think you have to set a goal and then you and know where you're headed and then pick small steps of places where you can see ROI and start to implement those. But you really want to come up with a roadmap. And that roadmap will guide you. And we know for sure that, the companies that do get involved now will be set up in the future. There's a lot of work that has to be done. We work with clients where, we're working with, a group or a couple of groups of their engineers just to prepare them on how to use the system effectively. You can use the system out of the box. It doesn't mean that you'll be good at using the system, right? So, it is definitely a learning curve. So I think the organization really has to come and support this effort, and to see and really open their mind as to how we can solve problems. Oftentimes the use cases aren't evident, right? You've been doing things a certain way for a long time, but you have, like in the case of, I think one of the problems that is being solved with physical AI, and specifically with what we're seeing with in Archetype, is we're generating trillions of bytes of information, new data daily, and most of it is not being used, right? So when you look at, suppose, different refineries or factories or industrial settings, they literally have thousands of sensors of which they're not gaining intelligence out of a lot of them. That's a process to go from, not having a lot of intelligence to having full intelligence. And how do you layer that intelligence? I think that's, it's a problem that I'm confident that we're part of the solution to that, but just there has to be a commitment, I think, to going there.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Sisinio. That was fantastic. I think we've in the essence of time, we'll actually move over to the next section. So, Raleigh, Sisinio, thank you so much for the insightful conversation. This is really great hearing your perspectives. Um, For those of you in the audience, please continue to use the Q&A feature to add in any questions. We will get to that at the end. But what we're going to do now is quickly cover a quick overview of Archetype so you can hear a little bit more about us and the platform. So let me share my screen again. Hopefully you can now see this. Okay, great. So we'll cover this quickly and then we'll head into the Q&A. So for those of you who are new to the company, Archetype helps you understand the physical world through the lens of sensor data. We built a foundation model that can understand any physical process so that you're able to quickly deploy agents that can perceive and operate in the real world. And so I know some of these points were actually covered through the discussion, but I think it's helpful to reiterate that as we think about scaling AI across the landscape in manufacturing, there are several challenges that really stand out. I think the first point, Sisinio actually just mentioned, no surprise here, but with all the sensor and IoT deployments, we generate terabytes of data every day across a single site. But how do we actually translate that from just data to operational intelligence? It's pretty difficult. And as we think about AI as a solution to do this, we see that today there are a lot of classical approaches that are, one, very time intensive. They require lots of training data for every use case. And oftentimes getting enough training data can be difficult. And then once we actually move into production, we talked about the idea of model drift. Accuracy drops, and it requires that upkeep and that retraining to keep performant. But also, as you get successes in one site, when you actually want to translate that to the next site and really scale it across your network, it doesn't always work out so well. Um, and lastly, we just also need to consider that idea and concept around data and AI sovereignty, specifically in these environments where that's really critical. So at Archetype, we're working to solve this with a foundation model that can actually understand data across all these different sensors and make it easy for anyone to actually interpret and take action on that. It's pre-trained, which means that it ultimately works out of the box. So you don't have to spend lots of time training custom models for every use case. We can just provide a few examples and of what you want to see and make predictions on that. And it also means that we can actually work across the real world variants. It's what we call generalizes so that it works across different assets, OEMs, different manufacturers, but also conditions in different sites. So you can use that one model that can work across that real world variance. And then also, we want to make sure that we have state-of-the-art AI that can actually operate in the environments your operations are. So whether that's on premise, on the edge, while respecting that data sovereignty. So what we've done is we built Newton, which is a foundation model for the physical world. You can think of Newton as like similar to a large language model from an OpenAI or an Anthropic. But in addition to understanding language and vision, Newton also understands sensor data. So it's effectively like a chat GPT for the physical world. You can ask Newton to explain in natural language what's actually happening across all your physical sensor readings, across your machines, processes, and your entire factory. And this means that what we can do is we can take that one model and use it to understand any type of sensor. We can also start to actually bring together and fuse signals across these sensors to make predictions that you otherwise couldn't. And it also means that we can take this one model and with just basic prompting and providing a few different examples, we can actually adapt that to work across applications across the factory floor. So you no longer have to work with and manage multiple solutions or vendors for every sensor or every use case. It's one foundation model that can work across all of the physical operations. And so we offer Newton through our platform, which can run privately in your cloud. So that means that data never has to leave, but we can also customize Newton to your own use cases. We provide tools that allow you to build physical agents that can run on premise and on the edge and analyze sensor data across the factory. We're actually seeing this drive use cases like detecting anomalies in critical infrastructure or equipment, optimizing manufacturing processes for throughput, yield, or efficiency, but also improving maintenance scheduling, quality, and more. And in addition to the platform, we also offer pre-built agents that work out of the box on some of the most common use cases that we see. So For the first one, if you're looking to perform anomaly detection on your physical assets, we have an agent for that. If you want to verify that a standard operating procedure is being followed correctly, we can, provide a video and a checklist of steps, and we can actually monitor that. And lastly, if you're looking to monitor safety in your physical spaces, we have an agent that can actually adapt to any of these environments, but also to any safety rule or protocol you have. And again, this is all due to the generalizability of our foundation model, that it can work across all these different use cases. It's multimodal, which means that we can take multiple signals in, whether that's something like video, text, or any type of sensor data, but also multi-signal out, so that in these use cases, we can do things like generate text-based insights, generate visualizations, or even do things like output commands to turn things on or off. So it can fully integrate into your physical systems and how your operators actually interface with them. And to quickly touch on a few success stories here, we've applied Newton across many different use cases. And in this first one, we actually worked out of the box, hooked up to machinery on the factory floor to immediately identify if there were any issues in the machines. And there wasn't a need to do months of custom work or model training. This actually worked out of the box. In the second example, we worked with a wind farm operator to detect anomalies in complex wind turbines. And not only were we able to detect these anomalies, but we were also able to find fault patterns that our customer wasn't even aware of. This comes back to Newton's deep understanding of physics and the ability to bring in that multimodal sensor data. So we're bringing in data from over 40 sensors to make those predictions that other more shallow classical learning approaches may not catch. And then in the third example, we work with a construction customer that was looking to bring together data across multiple signals. So video feeds of the construction site, weather data, and tidal information on the river they were actually operating on, to use this to understand equipment and worker utilization to ultimately improve productivity and avoid cost overruns in these projects. And so that's Archetype. We're a foundation model that can understand any physical process. We can run on the edge where your operations are today and solve many use cases, from process optimization to anomaly detection. So at this point, we'll now transition over to the Q&A section of the webinar. So please, I see some questions coming in. Please continue to do that. And we'll open the floor and actually take a look at these questions and kick it off. So let me take a look at our Q&A here. So I think, how about this first one? We can pass this one to Raleigh around, where do customers, or where have you seen companies overestimate or maybe underestimate their readiness as they look to, embark on their physical AI journey?
Mm, Overestimate, underestimate. Yeah, from an overestimation perspective, I would say, to say we have lots of data does not equal we have lots of AI ready data, right? So I think most manufacturers, they're effectively drowning in data, but they're starving for real usable, labeled, streaming data. And I think, having maybe a historian full of sensor logs is not the same as having a pipeline a model can actively consume, right? And so I think the classic problem of data readiness, I think, is still something that is there, something that we struggle with, and something that, in fact, we use AI to kind of help normalize some of that data. But just to have data does not mean you're sort of ready to go, right? There's a little bit of a processing step to ensure that you have realistic expectations and outcomes for the model. And then, maybe from an underestimation perspective, and I actually haven't heard this term once on this call, which is great, and probably because we're with more mature practitioners. But you'd be surprised when I talk to customers, they associate physical AI with robotics, and so therefore there's this sort of chasm to say, I'm not ready for robotics. I'm not ready, and when in fact it's when I think about physical AI, I think about the maturity journey. It's all about uh, maybe robotics is at the far end of that maturity journey, but the same insights that are driven, the same, vision language action models that drive the robotic decisions, that drive the reasoning, are available in your organization today. So if you have sensors on the shop floor, if you have OT data, if you have camera, RTSP feeds or image data, you can practice the value of physical AI today. So you're creating a decision framework, you're gathering the right data, and then it's just a matter of if you're thinking about robotics in the future, you're just moving that platform to a different form factor is all. So that's really an interesting one that I hear in terms of an underestimate. It's like you're ready sooner than you might think.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that, because I agree with everything Raleigh just said. I think sometimes too, just from a very simple tactical perspective, sometimes companies aren't ready, even things like IT and how it's set up and how to gather and collect that information. Yeah, you might be collecting it, but it might not be in a ready form to ingest in a real-time perspective. So I think there's kind of very tactical types of things that can get in the way for adoption that need to be solved before you introduced a physical AI.
Yeah. Thank you. Actually, this one, Sisinio, how does Archetype handle variability across different conditions or different operating conditions?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So by having a foundation model, what you hope is over time we can solve, most problems out of the box. Obviously, on that spectrum, there's going to be things that are harder and easier. There's going to be things that the model is less familiar with. So we have a lot of dials into how we can optimize Newton, for example, for different types of operating conditions. At If you look at something like a field operations or different assets, it might have different characteristics depending on where they are running. Suppose they're running in a colder or warmer climate, more humid, less humid. They might be interacting with terrain underground that is different. The way the machine will vibrate or the way that the motors will work will be slightly different in all those. And those small changes can be handled with what we call N-shot examples. So we actually take examples of the motor or the asset operating in a specific environment, and we can sample those and we use those as examples in the context to Newton. So we don't have to retrain the model. We just provide some examples. Like, here's what we're looking for. Oh, and by the way, these are some examples at that site that allow you then to optimize. And it doesn't necessarily have to be per site. It could be across a geographic area. It could be more in your domain. The other things that people are probably familiar with is fine tuning. So we can take a model like ours, and our model is a 7 billion parameter model. So that allows us to run it on kind of edge devices, it can, on like GPUs, like L40S NVIDIA platform. But we can actually compress that larger model down. So we can take a 7 billion parameter model and compress it down to, for example, we have in our use case with Bellevue, they're running it at 1 billion parameters. And what that does is it allows you to run more feeds. So you're optimizing then for performance, right? You have a certain amount of GPU available to do inference, and now we're going to optimize for the number of feeds we can use. We also can take our purely physical model. So we have a physical model and a semantic model. We can decouple those, and now we can take that physical model, which is much smaller, it's under 100 million parameters, and we can put that on a much smaller device for inference. So those are different ways that you can optimize it. So yeah, so distillation, it makes the model smaller. Fine tuning allows you to focus a little bit more in your domain. N-shot examples allows you to kind of in the context without changing the model at all. So, those are some of the things that we look at. And then there's all the parameter tuning as well, which, they can use as well. The other thing we can also do is we can chain these along. Like AI doesn't have to be, a one thing. It can be progressive. So we can do AI at the edge, distillation, where we take raw sensor data and we extract intelligence out of that. And as you start to walk higher and higher up in the organization, we can provide layers of intelligence. You know, that at the very top you can gain an organizational intelligence of your company or your group or whatever, and you can drill right down to individual sensors and assets to see how they're performing.
Great. Thanks, Sisinio, for that answer. And that actually, in your answer, I think you covered one of the next questions that actually had come in about the edge hardware. But I want to be conscious of time because we are supposed to wrap at the 45-minute mark. So I think what we can do, let me share my screen one more time if I can. So I think at this point we do have to wrap. But thank you everyone for joining, and thanks so much, Raleigh and Cicinio, for just such a great conversation. It was really we really appreciate hearing from you. As a reminder, we will send a recording of this session after. And I know that there were a bunch of questions here that weren't answered, so please connect with us either on LinkedIn, X, or on our website. We'd be happy to have a discussion and stay in touch on some of these questions. But also keep an eye out because we will be running more of these sessions. So there'll be more opportunities to actually go through some of these questions. But again, thank you so much for joining everyone in the audience. And thank you again, Raleigh and Cicinio, for your time today.
Thanks for
Thanks,
having me, guys.
Raleigh. Thanks, Aristo. This is
Wonderful
great.
session. Great to
Yeah,
spend time with you both. All
absolutely.
right.
Thank you.